Okay, item 7, approval of supplementary agenda. Do we have a supplemental agenda?
Yes, we do. So council, on Friday afternoon, we sent out a supplementary agenda for 16C. It's the architectural services for the multi-use recreational facility. It will be added at that time on the agenda under 16C.
Item 8, disclosures of pecuniary interest, direct or indirect, for open session agenda items and the general nature thereof. Councillor Solomon.
Thank you, Your Worship. Consent agenda, which is item 11A1. 11A1 involves clients of mine, and I have filed the appropriate form.
Item 9, consideration of proposed declaration to close the road allowance known as lane in rear of lots 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 on Plan 339 in the community of Merlin. The property being considered to be closed legally described as plan of survey of lane in rear of lots 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, registered Plan 339, Municipality of Chatham-Kent. During the week of June 17, 2019, a notice of intention to close the above-noted road allowance was published in the Tilbury Times newspaper for a 1-week period and on June 12, 2019 on the municipal website. I will now invite any person wishing to be heard to approach the podium and give reasons why their lands will be adversely affected by this declaration to close this portion of the road allowance. Seeing none, what's the will of council? Councillor Oche.
I'd like to move all 3 recommendations.
Councillor Harrigan.
I'll second the recommendations.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Item 10, deputations.
Council, this evening we have 2 deputations with regards to items on the current agenda. Both deputations refer to item 17A, which is the Ontario Heritage Act request for demolition listed property at 595 Wallace Street in the community of Wallaceburg. The first presenter is Chris Williams. He is the chair of the Heritage Advisory Committee. And following that will be Sharon Burgraff. I remind both speakers that they have a maximum of 5 minutes and the timer will be on the screen. Welcome, Chris.
Hello, Council. It's my honor to be speaking in front of you. As was mentioned, I'm a representative from the Municipal Heritage Committee. And tonight we want to talk to you about the Steinhoff House, which is also known as 595 Wallace Street in Wallaceburg. You will be voting on a demolition request tonight. That was a motion made because it is listed on our Municipal Heritage Register, which means that they had 60 days notice in order to present demolition, and that is coming up this week. I just wanted to give you a quick background on the house and why we think it's a fairly important house before you make a decision whether to vote to demolish it or not. It's called the Steinhoff House because it was built by Captain James Steinhoff, who was the first mayor of Wallaceburg. And not only was he the first mayor, he kind of built Wallaceburg. He was a shipbuilder. He started off with 2 young cows, which he traded for 100 acres of land in Chatham-Kent. And then he built that up into a shipbuilding business that would run up and down the Sydenham and back and forth between Chatham and Detroit. During that time, he made a name for himself by running a mill, starting the Steinhoff and Gordon stave mill, and then the Sydenham Glass Company, which then became the Dominion Glass Company, and over the next 100 years provided the base, the industrial base that turned Wallaceburg from a rural community into an industrial one. For all this, he was named mayor by the citizens of Wallaceburg, and during that time he donated a 5-acre site in Quality Point area that became Steinhoff Athletic Park. As well, one of his last gifts to the community was sponsoring the War Memorial Cenotaph that was originally placed in Library Park in 1921. We consider him to be one of the more influential people who shaped Wallaceburg itself and what we know today. He gave basically the industry in Wallaceburg for 100 years. That's how long his legacy lasted, just business-wise. Unfortunately, at some point in 1858, he had 595 Wall Street built, which was the first brick building in Wallaceburg at the time. He had it shipped up the river because he did own a lot of boats, and so he was able to afford to do that. We call it a Gothic Revival building. It looks like this. And it's a wonderful Gothic revival with some Italianate features. It's kind of a mishmash of stuff. It's been added on to over the years, and it was, in its day, quite a nice home. It's prominently located, it's right next to the bridge, Murray Street Bridge in Wallaceburg, and would have been considered an absolute landmark. Unfortunately, these older buildings that were so big back in the day, they were they didn't really make for good single-family residences, and they're now have been divided up. Lots of them have been divided up into apartments or other uses. From there, they kind of fell into disrepair, depending on how the property owners treated it and the tenants. In the past, there was in Wallaceburg a petition for the house to be taken away from the previous owner because they were so upset with the tenants who were running the place. Despite that, we feel, the Heritage Committee still feels like the building itself is not to blame, and the history behind it for the Wallaceburg area is so very important. As we saw from Retrofest this weekend, a history is a huge benefit to the community, and a history that you can reach out and touch, that is tactile, that is there, not just written on a screen or in a book, something you can actually see and feel and wander by is super important. And without, if you tear things down, you have nothing to build on later. The Retrofest, I think, this weekend shows that if you have something to build on, you can have something incredibly successful. The committee would like to recommend that you actually designate this property. It is currently just sitting on the register as not a designated property and thus is not protected from being torn down. Wallaceburg itself has no designated buildings in it at all. It is one of the few places in the county that is completely unprotected other than being on the register, which gives you notice that they want to tear it down. We have prepared a preliminary designation report, which can be submitted to you if you feel that this building and its history, which we feel is quite important to Wallaceburg locally in general.
Mr. Williams, that's time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Last speaker for deputations is Sharon Burgraff on the same item.
That's not what I want up there, but I don't want mine up there yet either. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sharon Burgraff, and I am here to speak on Agenda Point 17A, which is the removal of 595 Wallace Street in Wallaceburg from the Chatham-Kent Municipal Register. Thank you very much. That is it. Thank you. I'm not so great with technology. The last 14 years have not been kind to 595 Wallace Street. The property changed hands into, well, it'll run by itself if you start it. Really? Yes, so don't. Okay, how do I make it stop?
Okay. Happy to stop it, yeah.
There we go. Let's start again at the beginning. Okay, the last 14 years have not been kind to 595 Wallace Street. The property changed hands in 2005, 2006, 2008, and in 2009 when it was purchased by the previous owner who lives out of town in Cambridge. It seems that after the property was added to the register in January of 2010, the care and maintenance of the building became a very low priority, and by November 6th of 2015, the owner was issued an order to remedy unsafe building. In the report, Paul Lucina notes that the plumbing system is in disrepair, there was no gas, heat, or hot water in the structure, the front balcony, rear deck, and entrances were collapsing, and the fire separations and doors were missing. In June of 2017, the building was placed on the market and continued to suffer from a lack of attention. A further indication of the lack of owners' interest in the building was the $6,500 worth of back taxes that were left unpaid on the property. By the time our numbered company purchased the building in January of 2019, the building was, in our belief, dangerous to the community and beyond repair within any feasible financial parameters. Since purchasing the building, we have gone into the unoccupied units and safely filled a 40-yard roll-off bin with garbage, left behind belongings, and countless evidences of illegal drug paraphernalia before securing all of the entrances and boarding up the windows to prevent further trespassing. But we wanted you to see for yourselves how significant the damage is, so I went back to the building on Friday and took some photographs that I would like you to see at this time. Now see if I can get it to go. Thank you. That's the basement. Thank you for your attention. It is our hope that you will vote in favor of the recommendation of removing 595 Wallace Street in Wallaceburg from the Municipal Heritage Register to allow the demolition of the building to proceed. Doing so will move us all one step closer to our vision of a new and exciting project for Wallaceburg in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 11, consent agenda. Any items to be removed from the consent agenda and placed aside for consideration and debate separately? Councillor Kirkwood-White.
Thank you, Your Worship. 11A1 and 11A3, please.
Okay, Councillor Kirkwood-White.
Thank you very much. I just want to draw folks' attention to the report that was provided by Anne Marie Milson on the CK Transit Task Force. In the terms of reference that were established by the task force back in February, it was determined that the task force would conclude on March 31st, 2020, with the understanding that the term of the task force would be either terminated prior to this date or extended as determined by the completion of specific tasks. And I can tell you that a week ago Friday, I chaired my last meeting of the Transit Task Force. At the recommendation of administration, it was determined that over the course of the 5 meetings that were held, that we had accomplished the majority of the work that we were assigned, and we're now moving into the next phase of the project, which is the strategy project under the leadership of Ian Clark. And I would like to take this opportunity to let you know that there were a number of significant changes we felt that were made as part of our work. The transfer time for the conventional service was increased from 60 minutes to 70 minutes. New signage was installed on the buses. Service level changes for routes on the Chatham Conventional Service and the Interurban were addressed, and quotes were obtained by administration, which will be brought forward to council for approval in June. And the In-Touch connections, we addressed some complaints there. And there were actually two subcommittees formed of the Transit Task Force. The first one had to do with a top 10 list on rider complaints, and the second had to do with quick fixes for the interim service level improvements for both the Chatham Conventional and the Interurban Service. So I wanted to take this opportunity to thank the members of the task force for the work that they undertook, and to let everybody know that those same members have been invited to be part of the public information centers that will be held as part of the Transportation Master Plan.
Okay, 11A3. Councilor Kruger-White.
Thank you very much. Just a very quick note to acknowledge the partnership between Community Living Wallaceburg and the municipality of Chatham-Kent, and to just say that it's nice to see a government and not-for-profit partnership established that will serve the needs of the clients that are served by this agency.
Thank you. Any questions on that? Other questions? Councilor Pinsino, you had one as well?
Yeah, 11A2, Your Worship.
Okay, well, you can over to you for 11A2.
All right, thanks, Your Worship. Thank you to Thomas for getting this report out. I still, I think that, you know, they say there's not a lot of difference in the traveling time, but it does make a difference. It deters people from coming to Ridgetown in a lot of cases. And Rosa Beach line is going to be closed for an indefinite period of time, maybe forever. That's the reality, because the millions of dollars it's going to take to fix the lake bank along there is probably not going to happen. I guess I find it a little hard to imagine $716,000 it's going to cost to pave this, but I do think it's an investment in the future of Ridgetown. So I would like to move that the municipality move forward with the tar and chip of McKinley line to finish the connecting link for the residents going to Ridgetown.
The seconder for that? Councilor Wright?
I'll second that, Mayor Can.
Okay, Councilor Pinsino, anything to add?
I know it's hard to imagine. That is a lot of money. It's, and when you look at it on the map, it doesn't look like it's a long ways, but it does deter people from going there. And just, I'd ask for your support. You have to do what you have to do, but I really believe that this is a deterrent, and I really do believe it affects the merchants in Ridgetown. Thanks.
Any questions? Councilor Foss.
Thank you, Your Worship. More of a comment, I guess, than a question. I appreciate where Councilor Pinsino is going, and I can see the issue that he has there. But my fear is that opens the door to an issue that we had in the Says line and Island View Road area. My fear is that we open that door, that opens the door for a lot of other areas that want the same thing, and we dealt with that at the time we were dealing with that group. They're not the only group. There are several groups out there that want tar and chip roads, and if we do it there, it just opens the door for us to do it everywhere, and as you know, the budget just doesn't allow for that. So, and you look at the $700,000, I think the one in Snaies View is right around $1 million, you know, so pretty close to the same money. So I just won't be able to support it for those reasons.
Councilor Sakacci?
Just kind of, I want to make the same sentiment Councillor Foss just made, so I'm not going to repeat it. I just know that there are roads in our area as well that would really justify getting done. And I guess I have a question for Thomas or for Mr. Tiber, if you don't mind, just the general condition of that road, because I can honestly admit that I haven't traveled that road frequently and not at all in the last little bit. So if someone can give me just a little briefing on where it kind of sits in your your list and just a general condition of the road.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So the McKinley Road from Rose Beach Line to New Scotland Line is a gravel road. It is currently being maintained as a gravel road in accordance with our with MMS standards there for gravel road maintenance. To our knowledge, there hasn't been any real concerns about the condition of it. It's being maintained properly with your typical grading operations and maintenance levels through Public Works.
So no, nothing that really stands out from the excessive traffic on that road, that there's been any real safety concerns or concerns to the grading of the roads or nothing like that? Everything seems to be within your minimum standards?
Nothing has been brought to our attention of any concern today.
Thank you for your comments.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you very much. With Councillor Pinsonneau's motion here, does that mean it moves forward under the road upgrade policy?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So as I understand the motion, no, he's asking to move forward, I guess, against not going forward with the local improvement policy for the road upgrade policy. So it's to do it through municipal tax base rather than through the road upgrade policy.
That's what I wanted to know. So $716,000. Do we have any idea, when we look at the 45 vehicles a day, is that before or after we had the Rose Beach line closure?
That rating was before the closure.
Do we have any idea what the numbers would be after?
Not at this time. We have not gone out to restudy since the closure.
I think before I could even potentially support that, I would need to know how many vehicles are traveling up and down McKinley Road between Rose Beach Line and New Scotland Line. And I would need to know, because obviously with Rose Beach closed indefinitely, there is going to be more traffic on there, without a doubt. And potentially, with that increase of traffic, maybe it does warrant tar and chip. Maybe it moves it high enough up in the matrix that, yes, that's a possibility. Maybe it moves it past roads that we have in our ward, like the Blind Fourth or any place else that wants to see tar and chip. Then again, maybe it doesn't. So at this point, I can't support this for the same reasons Councillor Foss put forward. We can't go jumping queues and moving things around at whims. I'd love to see a report back saying, here's the new the new traffic numbers, but as it sits, I can't support.
Councillor Harrigan, followed by Councillor Wright.
Just a quick question about the date on the report in the background section. It notes August 13th, 2018 meeting where the notice of motion was approved. Is that an incorrect date? Like, this is something we brought up just last month, no? I just want to confirm that because I read this. I was very confused with the timeline.
Thank you, Mayor Camp. Yes, you are correct. That is an error on the report. It was as a result of the motion that was brought forward this year.
Okay, and just to follow, I just want to echo that I think the road upgrade policy is a policy that I often direct residents and citizens to, not just for roads, but also for things like sidewalks and requests for sidewalks. And the process is very rigorous, and it's something that it's important we consistently follow. So I'll be voting I won't be able to support this because I think that maintaining the processes outlined in our policies are really important for us to do.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. This situation here, our stores in Ridgetown are really struggling. The local people are struggling with it. The tourism is really struggling because it puts them in a bad situation when they come down the road because everybody's confused where to go. The 45 car seems awful light. There's a lot more residents and people coming out of the park than that, but it is a real problem out there and it needs to be addressed somehow.
Councillor Pinson, any closing comments?
No, I think we've had some good discussion on this.
Okay, see no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion fails 5-13.
Okay, can I get a motion to accept all the other items in the consent agenda? Councillor Kirkwood-White, followed by Councillor Finn. Oh, need their hands or vote? All in favor? Carried. Item 12, notice of motion. Councillor Thompson?
Strap in, this is a long one. Here we go. I, Councillor Trevor Thompson, hereby provide notice that I will bring forward the following motion at the July 15th council meeting for discussion and voting. Whereas the municipality of Chatham-Kent has already acknowledged the ongoing negative impacts of climate change throughout the municipality, whereas the federal motion of June 17th, 2019 passed 186 to 63 to declare a national climate emergency describes climate change as a real and urgent crisis driven by human activity, whereas the impacts of climate change will be catastrophic to Chatham-Kent's local economy and municipal budget and will result in significant adversity for the constituents of Chatham-Kent. Whereas the municipality of Chatham-Kent can join a movement of municipal governments who agree that significant change must occur at the local level in order to affect local and global change in line with globally acceptable targets. Whereas the municipality of Chatham-Kent can position itself as a leader in municipal policy, setting the example of how to reduce the municipality's own environmental impact through areas such as procurement, life cycle assessment, community services, urban planning to meet global targets referenced in the Paris Agreement. Whereas positioning the municipality of Chatham-Kent as an environmentally responsible and sustainable partner can attract further investment to our community from partners and stakeholders. And whereas an emergency is defined as an often dangerous situation requiring immediate action, and whereas the United Nations has identified that there is only 11 years left to prevent irreversible damage from climate change, therefore be it resolved that the municipality of Chatham-Kent officially declare a climate emergency for the purposes of joining a national and international movement and to provide a lens through which all strategies, policies, action items, and opportunities can be viewed, and that staff work swiftly to identify target areas in municipal policy through which specific changes can have the greatest impact to reduce our individual and collective environmental impacts, and that staff work swiftly to identify means to engage all constituents, partners, and stakeholders as active participants in preventing further climate change while reducing damages that have already occurred.
Councillor C. McGregor?
Thank you. I, Councillor Carmen McGregor, hereby provide notice that I'll bring forward the following motion at the July 15th, 2019 council meeting for discussion and voting, that the traffic and parking bylaw 245-2004 be amended to include the following changes for the community of Wallaceburg. 1, that municipality convert the 3 on-street parking spaces on the north side of James Street, immediately east of Nelson Street, to 2 accessible permit spaces in accordance with the provincial legislation and as requested by the adult senior management. 2, the senior pedestrian crossing signs be installed in the area of the adult center along James Street. 3, the municipality convert the on-street parking spaces along Nelson Street between Wellington Street and Elizabeth Street from a 1-hour limit to a 2-hour limit. And 4, the municipality convert the existing 12 public parking spaces in Municipal Lot K from a 2-hour limit to a 3-hour limit, and the municipality investigate the use of Connect Park on Fork Street for extra parking spaces to be added to Parking Lot O. The above recommendations will include communication with Wallaceburg BIA and local affected business owners and report back to council at the August 12th council meeting.
Item 13, tender awards.
Number 13A, single source 4WD industrial 90 horsepower tractor loader, R19-290.
Councillor Oche?
Thank you. I'll make the motion for both recommendations, but I do have a question afterwards.
Okay. Councillor Finn?
I'll second the motion.
Councillor Oche?
Thank you, Your Worship. I see this is a one source again, and this is nothing against anybody that sells John Deere. Well, I'm just asking, why are we just zoned in on John Deere? Why didn't we go to any other company? Or did we, and that's the only person that quoted?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. We did, so single source, Councillor, means it was advertised and that we received only a single response. Sole source means that we went to a specific vendor for a purpose. Okay. So this one was advertised. just one response was received.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in, motion passes 17-0.
Item 13B, RFP Award R19-263, new indoor pool dehumidifier, Blenheim Gable Rotary Pool.
Councillor Thompson,
Happy to move the recommendations.
Councillor Scotchy.
Equally happy to second it.
Any questions? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. My only question on this is, have we ever dealt with this company that's had the lowest price? Being Postman is a local company, and they have a lot of employees, and they pay a lot of taxes in the community. I know they're more money, but what's their rating on this company compared to Postma's?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Postma's was disqualified. This is really just for supply.
Okay.
There's going to be a subsequent tender released this week for the actual installation that Postma will probably, I'm assuming, would bid on. I can't speak for the company. Postma's actually, they were rejected because the bid, they didn't meet the bid requirements that were laid out in the tender.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in, motion passes 17-0.
Item 13C, Single Source Tender Award Contract T19-102A, Fiber Reinforced Surface Treatment.
Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendations.
Councillor Crew.
Thank you, I'll move them. Second them, sorry.
Any questions? Councillor Kirkwood-White.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is just a question to either Thomas or Chris. Had a question this week about the condition of the roads around the post office in downtown Chatham and the need to curve or, swerve around a number of potholes. Can you tell us when that's earmarked for repair on the list?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Could you repeat the area you're asking?
The area around the post office in downtown Chatham.
That is an asphalt road, I believe. In downtown Chatham. I believe that's an asphalt road, not a tar and chip road. I'd have to look at the PCI ratings and see what the PCI is to determine where it's at in the list.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Councillor C. McGregor.
Chris has got a question.
No. Actually, I don't have a question, I just had a comment. And I guess I just wanted to point out again the innovations of this process that's being brought forward with our committee in the Innovation Infrastructure and Innovative Committee. We've asked that Thomas and his department to be looking at new innovative ways to, stretch our dollars and try different methods in our roads. And this is just another example where they've taken that direction from us and moved forward in trying some new innovative ways in trying to get through our 3,500 kilometers of paved roads. So thank you, Thomas, for taking that from our group and bringing it out in recommendations. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in, motion passes 17-0.
Item 13D, Single Source Tender Award Contract T19-102, Surface Treatment.
Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendations.
Councillor Bondi.
I'll second it, Mayor Caniff.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in, motion passes 17-0.
Item 13 E, tender award contract T19-240, rehabilitation of Cooper Road and Pollard Line, bridges over Government Drain Number 1.
Counselor Oche,
So I'd like to move both these recommendations.
Counselor Harrigan,
Happy to second these recommendations.
any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in, motion passes 17-0.
Item 13F, sole source request, residential bathing, mechanical lift, disinfectant, and bed replacement for Riverview Gardens.
Counselor Crew,
I'd be happy to move these recommendations.
Counselor B. McGregor,
I'll second it.
any questions? Counselor Scotchy,
Just a question to April really quickly. I do see this as a sole proposal here. Obviously, that's because of the standardization of the process and for policies and procedures. I guess the question would be directed to yourself. Just out of curiosity, is anybody that is a supplier of similar equipment, is it a lot more difference in pricing wise? It has a lot, is there a big benefit to changing it? Because I do know that there is, labor costs are high as well for training if it's different. So is there a similar pricing for the two different, the competitors, or is it?
Oh, thank you. So what our home uses is Arjo equipment. So from a training perspective, staff know how to use it, residents know how to use it. From a parts and supplies, we can mix and match, and maintenance doesn't have to try to find different types of pieces to match equipment. So that's part of the reason for sole sourcing Arjo. And it is a best practice in the healthcare field to stick with similar equipment once it's installed and to continue to replace.
Fair enough. I just wanted this, just because it was sole, that means that we reached out, so I just kind of wanted to get a little bit of clarification. I had a feeling it had to do with standardization of policies and procedures, so just wanted to clarify, because kind of picking who we're dealing with, right? So just wanted to make sure that we are dotting all our I's and crossing all our T's. Thank you.
Exactly. Thank you.
Counselor Latimer,
Just a question. They provide training to you free of charge or ongoing on the use and the maintenance of it?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I can find the answer out for you. I actually don't know the answer at this point in time, but I can find that out. Get back to you.
Thank you.
Mary Alice, you did a fantastic job answering your first questions in your role. See no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in, motion passes 18-0.
Item 14, Community Human Services.
Item 14A, Chatham-Kent 2018 Housing and Homelessness Progress Report. We have a presentation by Chantal Perry, Your Worship.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for having me here tonight to present a quick overview of the progress we made in homeless prevention and housing services in 2018. This report is a mandatory requirement of the province by the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Some of the main challenges and pressures that we faced in 2018 in housing and homelessness was decreasing vacancy rates and lack of affordable housing stock. Just 7 years ago, Chatham-Kent had a 7% vacancy rate, and in 2018, that rate shrunk to 2.3%. Right now, we're sitting at 2.1%. Over 3% is considered healthy for a community. You'll also note that the lack of affordable housing is being emphasized by the increases in the rent geared to income waitlist for public housing. In 2018, we have 834 people on the wait list compared to 650 in 2017. Rent has increased over time, adding pressure to the affordability for most households. The numbers on the screen of $720 in 2016 for a one-bedroom apartment and $770 in 2018 only tell a partial story. These numbers are from the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation and include average rent amounts based on a landscape survey. In reality, rents are often substantially higher, and anecdotal reports give the current rates for an average one-bedroom to be about $825. Utility costs have increased upwards of 80% in the last 7 years, and we're typically not including the amount of utilities with rent amounts. 28% of Chatham-Kent residents are spending over 30% of their total household income on housing-related expenses, and almost 12% are in what we call deep core need, which means that they're spending over 50% of their entire net household income on housing-related expenses. And 1 in 6 residents of Chatham-Kent live below the low-income measure. We have done significant work to improve existing affordable housing and increase affordable housing stock. Investments were made in 3 affordable housing development projects that began in 2018. 8 units on Kirk Street, 12 units on Michener, and 8 units on St. Clair Street in Chatham. That's 28 units total. 7 families were helped to purchase a modest home through the home ownership program, and housing allowances to help make private market rent stock affordable were issued to 47 families. Over $630,000, $280,000 in CK Renovates, and $357,000 in Ontario Renovates was issued to help 45 low to moderate income homeowners repair existing housing. And monthly portable housing benefits help make housing more affordable for 120 households through a number of programs such as Home for Good, Shelter Solutions, Community Homeless Prevention Initiative, and Housing First supportive housing programs. One of our major community accomplishments in 2018 was joining Built for Zero, formerly known as 20,000 Homes Campaign. As a Built for Zero community, Chatham-Kent is working towards reducing and ending homelessness locally by July 2020 by focusing on community outreach, knowing who in our community is homeless by name, and finding out what services and supports they need, and then establishing a coordinated access system whereby people that need help the most are prioritized for services and programs. Community achievements from our participation to date include instituting a quality real-time data system and a reliable method whereby we can find out who is homeless by name and know what level of supports and services they need and prioritize them for those services. We established a baseline number of people who are chronically homeless in our community. That number is 59, and now that we have a baseline, we can start measuring increases or reductions. We can actually measure our progress. We also track monthly the number of people that move into and out of chronic homelessness and the number of people that we get successfully housed. Since we began this tracking in March 2018, up to December 2018, we housed 79 high-needs chronically homeless people. And I'm really happy to report that we've started to make reductions in chronic homelessness in Chatham-Kent. As of June 2019, we've been below that baseline number for 3 consecutive months. Despite the challenges and increased need in our community, it's essential that we continue to maintain our focus on permanent housing solutions. The only way to end homelessness is with permanent housing. Many communities, when faced with pressure, bend and resort to Band-Aid solutions, like increasing transitional housing and shelter beds. These are very expensive and ineffective solutions to dealing with shelter insecurity and homelessness. It does not end homelessness, but instead it increases instability, trauma, personal safety, physical and mental health issues. It costs more to a community in emergency, police, and health service usage. The Homeless Response Line provides our community with a safe and dignified emergency housing option, whereby a person is offered immediate services and supports that they need, and then help to find housing right away. As you can see on screen, the number of callers and the number of stays has increased from previous years. 49% of callers are repeat users. Our newly implemented assessment, service prioritization methods, and homelessness information database has confirmed that repeat callers to our Homeless Response Line have increasingly high service needs. This means that they need supportive housing to find and keep housing. The only way we can help them end their homelessness for good is through increasing our Housing First supportive housing programming. In 2018, almost 1.8 million was utilized in our community to fund the development and delivery of supportive housing and homelessness programming, including emergency housing, rapid rehousing, housing stabilization, housing loss prevention, homeless prevention, and community food and meal programs. 204 people were moved from absolute homelessness to temporary housing, and 255 were moved from temporary to long-term stable housing. 899 households were provided urgent housing loss and eviction prevention services to ensure that they could remain in their existing homes. 1,157 households received financial and case management support to stabilize or secure housing, which includes utility rent arrears, rent deposits, and moving costs. And over 56,000 people in our community attended subsidized community meal programs that allowed them to stretch their income to help them afford their shelter costs. Over $220,000 was issued to 19 community agencies to help with the provision of housing stability and homeless support programs. Like many communities in Ontario and across Canada, we're seeing increased needs for affordable housing and homeless prevention. However, through progressive and focused programming and policy decisions, we are making progress here in Chatham-Kent. Increased supportive housing programming, proactive housing stability assistance, combined with continued community partnerships in the development of affordable housing, are key to ending homelessness locally and ensuring housing stability for everyone. In closing, I'd like to remind everyone that we're currently conducting community consultation to prioritize and plan the next 5 years of our community's housing and homelessness plan. I encourage everyone to complete our survey about community needs. The survey can be found online at chathamkent.ca or by calling our municipal call center. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, can I have a motion to accept? Sorry, Councillor Crew.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to move the report.
Councillor Latimer.
I'll second that.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Item 14B, Ontario Transfer Payment Agreement for Ontario, Canada, Ontario Community Housing Initiative and Ontario Priorities Housing Initiative and Municipal Contributions.
Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll move the recommendations.
Councillor Oche.
I'll second the recommendations.
Any questions? Councillor Kirkwood-White.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question to Shelley, if she's on her way up. Shelley, as you probably know, there's a group of people that have been meeting off and on for the last 3.5 years with regard to smaller, not necessarily tiny, but smaller homes, and I'm wondering whether any of this funding would be eligible for work in that area.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Through you to Councillor Kirkwood-White. Yes, I will be putting out, if Council approves this, I would be putting out a request for proposal, hopefully in July, in August at the very latest. And proponents are able to submit any type of proposal as long as they adhere to the funding limitations that we place on it. And that everyone that's applying would be required to attend a mandatory information meeting where we'll answer any kinds of questions that people have on the RFP. And yeah, as long as they're abiding with what we're requiring, it's welcomed.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Item 15, Finance, Budget, and Information Technology Services.
Item 15A, Asset Management Policy.
Councillor Harrigan.
I'll move the recommendation.
Councillor Finn.
I'll second it.
Any questions? Councillor Harrigan?
Hi, just a quick comment and then a small question. I really appreciated the level of detail in the asset management policy and the different principles that are considered. I think that's a really great way for us to move forward. What goes into the next required step, which is the enhanced asset management plan? And can you speak to kind of what will take place between now and then in order for us to get there?
Through you, Your Worship, we're in a pretty good spot for the next iteration of the asset management plan. Most of the criteria that's in there was in our 2017 asset management plan. The 2023 version, we may need to expand it a little bit to cover some more additional assets, but for the 2021 one, I think we're in pretty good shape. The 2024 one, there's a more detailed criteria that's going to be required for that one, but I think at that point we'd probably be ready to do some more in-depth analysis anyway. So I think we might just need to do a refresher on the 2021 one with basically the same criteria that we established now.
Okay, great, thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Item 15B, offer to purchase 9 Sullivan Street, Merlin.
Councillor Oche,
I would like to move this motion.
Councillor Harrigan,
I'll second the motion.
any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Item 16, infrastructure and engineering services.
Item 16A, Municipality of Chatham-Kent Development Standards Manual.
Councillor B. McGregor,
I'll move the recommendations.
Councillor Kirkwood White,
Second, thank you.
any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a tip of the hat to the team that put together the development standards. That's a gigantic step forward for our development process, and I know a lot of the folks in the room here played a huge role to play in that, and it's really going to make it much easier for our developers in the future to know what's expected and to reduce the time to get developments to the table, so thank you. The next item is 16B, motion by Councillor Harrigan regarding CK support for beautification processes.
Councillor Harrigan,
Great, thank you. I, Councillor Harrigan, move that administration provide a report to council identifying the current levels of service for support of beautification initiatives provided to communities for services such as flower basket hanging and holiday streetlight decorations, and that this report recommend processes or policies, new or existing, to improve the scheduling and/or equalize the service levels across CK, along with budget implications associated with those recommendations. And that council is to receive the report in time to provide direction ahead of the 2019 holiday beautification initiatives taking place across CK this winter, so that there's clarity for community groups working on beautification initiatives ahead of the holiday season.
Councillor Oche,
I will second that.
Councillor Harrigan,
I actually, can I point over to Councillor Cruz? She had an addition or a little friendly amendment before I speak to her, if that's okay.
Sir. Councillor Crew,
Thank you, Councillor Harrigan and Mayor Caniff. I would just like to add a friendly amendment that we include consultation with all 7 BIAs and horticultural societies.
And I'm happy to include that amendment. So now I can speak just really quickly.
yeah, Councillor Harrigan.
Great, thank you. So just for a little bit of background, recently I had an experience where a community group had changed in their leadership a couple of years back, and they've struggled in that change with how to organize how they're hanging flower baskets. And there was a significant amount of staff time, community volunteer time, my own time trying to facilitate how this process worked. And it exposed something to me that may be well known or less known across CK, but really depending on the community you live in, these beautification initiatives could be very easy to organize or very challenging to organize. So I think if you're a new volunteer, the real goal of this motion is to provide that clarity and transparency. And building from some of the meetings that I know Mayor Caniff had during his engagement with community groups, this is something that was expressed not just in my ward, but in wards really all across the community of Chatham-Kent. So it really just asks for, now with the amendment, some consultation and a public conversation to summarize very clearly what it is that CK can provide support to, so that these community groups know what they have to do, how much advance they have to provide, when they have to provide funds if necessary to pay for staff time to support or not support their initiatives. And I think that it just really helps everybody move forward and helps the municipality to provide as much support to their communities as possible. I also just wanted to mention that in speaking with Mr. Kelly and Mr. Brown, this is something that had been looked at, or the goal was to look at this at some point. And really what this motion does is it provides a little bit more guidance and then sets that timeline so that we can have our community groups benefit sooner rather than later from this process.
Councillor Thompson?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that I think this is a timely motion. I'm really happy that Councillor Harrigan brought it forward. I know out in our ward we've been dealing with some issues in the Erio area, trying to get something accomplished, and truth be told, although it looks bad on me, we've been working at it for 2, 3, 4 years without figuring out a way to get Christmas lights up, to get poles installed. And I think figuring out what the level of service is going to be and what the balance is going to be is really going to help communities like Erio that have seemed to be working uphill, trying to get, at the very least, what other small communities have as well. So look forward to getting this report back in a timely fashion.
Councillor Scotchy?
Just a real quick addition. I just wanted to commend Councillor Harrigan on this, what this captures, because sometimes, we're all listening and hearing about these big motions, but sometimes small motions like this that come to the forefront really help the community and help the BIA to establish, nice downtown cores. So I will be fully supporting it, and I'd like to commend her on what this grasps. So thank you for that.
Councillor Foss?
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess I was under the impression that this issue was already addressed, because I think that's being looked after in Dresden, and I thought it was looked after in the other areas as well, because during our consultation with service groups and the communities, that was one of the issues that was very prominent. And I'm glad that it's finally coming to the foreground so that other communities can benefit the same. So thank you.
Councillor Crew?
Thank you. I just want to echo what the other councillors said, and there has been some work done in the past, and if through that consultation, Paul Chattel from the Chatham BIA has a bunch of draft bylaws and that they were working on at one time, and it just kind of got put to the side. But this is about community pride, and when the communities have the support they need to make these things happen, and I think that's what we need to do. We're a big community and we have a lot of volunteers, so we need to make it as easy as possible for us to show what we're made of.
Councillor Solomon?
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't think I can disagree with anything I heard said, but I don't understand one of the phrases in there, and it would be helpful for me to understand it, and that is about line 5, where it says to improve the scheduling. No problem with that, and or equalize the service levels across CK. That I don't understand, because each community, the service levels aren't going to be the same because they are different size communities, different economies of scale. So through Your Worship, maybe could I get some clarification on what's meant by that, because all the rest of it seems fine and all of the comments are all glowing and positive. But if we're trying to equalize the service levels from service levels in Highgate will be different than the service levels in Blenheim.
Councillor Harrigan?
Yep, so I can just speak to that. And again, I don't know if the wording is perfect, but after conversations with staff, I think it'll be captured well in the report. The idea behind the service levels is around, so what is the municipality or Public Works going to do to support each community when it's time to hang holiday lights, or when it's time to put flower baskets up on poles across the communities? In my ward alone, there are 3 communities. I've specifically had conversations with 2 out of the 3 where one was not getting something, and another one was getting something. So that level of service, I think I agree, right? Like obviously the you know, community of Merlin may only have 10 flower baskets that they want to have, and the community of Chatham might have 50 that they want to hang. But it's the idea of what support can we provide to the scale of those communities for that instance of hanging flower baskets or for providing tree lighting, as an example.
Again, Your Worship, again, that makes perfect sense orally. But what the motion says is to equalize the service levels.
So I'm happy to, if you have a wordsmith suggestion or.
I just don't want it misinterpreted that we're gonna have, and maybe it's past history, that there was a wrong impression given that you'd get exactly the same service in one community as you would in another, and with no attention to the size, economies of scale, anything. And that sent out a wrong signal for 20 years. I didn't want it to continue. I thought it was time for a new phase of Chatham-Kent.
Yeah, Councillor Solomon, I just wanted to clarify that how I read it, and talking to people across the community, the issue was some communities were getting service, some weren't. So the idea is that they would all get a service, and yes, it certainly would be adapted to the community size and the needs of each community. So.
Yeah, well, some have BIAs and some don't. Some have horticultural organizations and some don't. And that's really up to the individual communities. But that's somewhat different than what we've got there. But as long as everybody understands that, I have no more to say.
Councillor Bondi?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. What I like about this, I'll just sort of make a suggestion. When the motion suggests that the report recommend process, so what I'm hoping happens, I'm sure this is going to pass by the sound of things. Similarly, if we call in, or if a citizen calls in about a pothole, they get an ACR number, and it's prioritized, blah, 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 et cetera. That's what I hope happens here, because the experience I've had trying to get flags replaced before Remembrance Day, not a big deal, right? But it's really a big deal, because you don't know who to call, and then the firemen end up doing it with the Legion guy on top, and hopefully he doesn't fall off, and then he gets, you know. But really, if there was a simple process for things like that, like for me, it's always been the Canadian flags at Remembrance Day. And I don't know who to call. So yeah, if there's some sort of process that's easy and understandable for all of us, it'd be a great thing. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote. Oh, Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor. My concern still is along the lines of Councillor Solomon. So the issue is that different communities have different requirements. So a simple example is Chatham may have 4 events per year, Tilbury may have 3, Merlin 2. So I just would appreciate clarity on the direction. So it appears that with this motion, Council will entertain additional investment. First of all, the budget implications. Do we bring everybody up to the level of 5 events per year like Chatham does? That's where I'm a little bit confused. And the history behind this is that it's been very much community driven, and those who have a more active community have asked for more services, or a lot of times they have done the service themselves. So we're all for the equalization. My concern is there's different numbers of events per year in each community. So is the direction to go the same number across the board? And is it clear that we will come back with an additional cost as well? That's the clarity I appreciate. Thank you.
Councillor Harrigan?
So to be clear, I'm not necessarily through this looking at event support. I recognize that might be an example that you're providing, but for example, snow plowing, I will use, right? Like there's a level of service for which roads across CK we snowplow and how often and how soon after a snowstorm takes place. And then based on that policy or those regulations, we would snowplow different roads across CK, and depending on that framework, some roads will get plowed more than others in different communities. What I'm asking for here is to understand or to provide publicly, what is the current service levels for beautification initiative? So beautification for me is around things like flag hanging, light hanging, things that communities are doing that are beautifying their downtowns. So not necessarily parades, events, things like that at this point, although I feel like communities would probably appreciate some open comments about what processes they could use to get ready for those things as well in a more clear way. in speaking with Ryan about this motion, like he seemed pretty confident that it captured what it was that your team was able to do in the report that they would be providing to us. So I'm not sure, maybe we can take it offline, what kind of clarity or what kind of detail in the report you'd be looking for. But I think what's important for our communities, large and small, is that during those seasonal beautification initiatives, there is an understanding of what CK is able to do for them, what they need to fundraise and pay CK to do for them if it's out of scope, and what they need to do on their own if necessary.
So thank you, Mayor. I'm sorry, I'm still struggling because, again, it talks about equalizing services. So does that, you know, again, Ryan and I looked at it as events per year. So some communities have only 3, some had 5. So therefore, is the direction, you want them all to have 5? Or do we equalize and everybody has 3? We can come up with that number based on what budget we have right now, but that's where I'm not exactly clear on how many events. That's where we were headed to, Ward, and when I look at this, I'm just not sure what the direction is. Do you want to equalize the number of events per community or make everybody the same?
Thank you, Your Worship. If I can take a stab. What we can offer to do to try and make it a baseline for people is to talk about, you know, what the cost would be for us to put up Christmas lights, what the cost would be to hang flower baskets. A lot of what I understood from your original notice of motion was things that were going to be hung on our lamp poles. And because those have hydro in them, the people that are going to do that work will be Integris, and there's a cost of delivering service. So I've already spoken with Jim Hogan at Integris. He's suggesting his team can put up a cost per level of service with X number of poles, and we can provide that back on an occurrence basis. And then council will eventually have to determine whether they're prepared to subsidize that, or whether that's something that can be done with local fundraising. But we could give you an estimate for the downtown core in each of the different communities and suggest that maybe 1 or 2 events per year could be subsidized, and then the rest would have to be a fee-for-service basis, something like that. And that way, it's actually the community can determine their level of service based on how much they want to pay.
I also, yeah, absolutely. And I also think some of the consultation with our BIAs and horticultural societies will provide staff with more direction based on the community feedback that will be given.
But that does not require that we all have 5, we all have 3. It's sort of a user pay. We might provide 2 per community, but whatever it is. Okay?
Councillor Oche?
Thank you, Your Worship. I know one of the locations, and it's the actual one that's not getting some of the service that we want, and it's Wheatley. And they were putting things up on the poles by themselves, and they got in trouble for that. So, so to say volunteers to do it, we go back and we say, no, you can't do that. So that's a problem right there. But secondly, I know, as Don was just saying about the poles being electrical, well, the ones in Tilbury, downtown Tilbury, are Tilbury's. They're not, or Chatham-Kent, sorry, they're not Integris. So Integris doesn't hang the items on there. Problem with Wheatley is half of them are Ontario Hydro, half of them are Integris. So there's a lot of different things coming together with Wheatley, but Wheatley seems to kind of get the brunt of, no, we won't do that for you, and or we'll hang the Christmas lights, but we can't plug them into the lamp, to the pole right there, and that's another problem. So then we got to wait another week for the poles to come, or for us to come and plug it into the poles, or Integris actually. So I think for the most part in Ward 1, it would be banners, Christmas lights, and flowers pots. I know Merlin gets flower pots and Christmas lights, and Wheatley is banners, flower pots, and Christmas lights. Tilbury's banners, flower pots, Christmas lights. So we're trying to, I guess, some are getting it, some are not, and none that I know of are paying. So I'm not sure why it's pick and choose, and I'm not saying that you're doing that, Thomas. I don't want you to think that at all, but I just don't understand why that's happening. So I think this is an excellent report on that. So I see what you mean by equalize the service levels, because not all places just in Ward 1 are getting the same treatment. And of course, we'll never have the baskets that Chatham, the city of Chatham would have to put up, but just to be able to get up, 15 baskets would be great. So I definitely will be backing this. I guess I seconded it, but and I have an idea on financing, but we can talk about that later after we see this. Thank you.
Councillor Pincinel.
Thank you, Your Worship. Every community is different. I totally get where Thomas is going with that. An option we could look at is area rating each community, as we do right now with our horticultural societies. Like I know in Thamesville, I got another one in there a while back. We pay for it. Nobody cares because it's the community that's beautifying. That way, if you have 10 events, your community pays for it. If you have one event, and the community itself can decide at that point what level of service they want. I think you would eliminate a lot of this whole, they got this, we didn't get that sort of thing, and it's just an option. But maybe that is the fairest way to go.
Okay, seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Item 16C, architectural services for the multi-use recreation facility.
Councillor B. McGregor.
I'll move the recommendation.
Councillor Crew.
Second.
Any questions? Councillor Pincinel.
Thank you, Your Worship. We spoke earlier on a motion I made, and that's, the outcome was let's follow the processes and procedures we have in place. And basically, this is changing our process and our procedure to do this. Cost is a big factor in everything we do, and sometimes gets into million of dollars. Honestly, I think cost does play a big part, and I can't support that we're going to lower the cost factor of the scoring process from 30 to 10%. Thank you.
Councillor Harrigan.
Just a quick question for Mr. Kelly through you. Regardless of whether or not the ceiling is public as part of the RFP process, we will have a budgetary ceiling for how much we're going to spend or how much we spend on this RFP, regardless of whether or not the weight is 30% or 10%. Correct?
Thank you, Mayor. That's correct. We always establish a budget before any RFP. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Just two quick questions to you, Thomas. Have we ever done anything like changing the process like this before? And number two, there's a part in the report that says additional investment may be required. Can you just provide a little bit more clarity about that statement in the report?
Thank you, Mayor. So in answer to the first question, I checked the record books, and we don't have any record where we've changed this 30% in the past. The reason that we're doing this is that the things that we purchase and we use with consultants are businesses that we are very, very familiar with. So it's roads, it's our bridges. We know very well exactly who the consultants are, even what they're going to quote, and we have a level of confidence in what they're providing. This is a one-time opportunity here. We don't have any database on multi-use facilities. So we really wanted to choose a supplier who has significant experience. And the concern is with the 30% rating, the way it works as well is that, say the quotation is, the lowest quotation comes in at $20,000 and somebody quotes $40,000. That $40,000 proposal could be the very best, most experienced person who's done government applications as well in the past, and the one who quotes $20,000 has none of that. That change can change the selection of the supplier, guaranteed, because the one who quotes $40,000 gets zero. for cost, and the one who quotes 20 gets 30. So that's our concern. We are applying for $47 million for government funding, so we just wanted to make sure that we chose the best, the most experienced, somebody who's done it in the past, to put ourselves in the best position to get the 47 million. And if we keep it at 30, I've seen it in the past, we have a lot of experience in this, there is a risk that you may end up with a potential supplier that doesn't have that experience. And therefore, in my mind, we're not going to put our best foot forward for the 47 million, and that's a lot of money. This money we're talking about, this is phase one only. The $47 million is so much higher than that. So there's a lot at stake here, and I just don't want to take that chance. Again, we leave it at 10%, so they are conscious of the cost, but 30%, my concern is we could end up with a supplier that doesn't bring us the expertise we need.
And just to clarify, I guess the part in the report that says additional investment may be required, that basically means that the lowest bidder might not get the bid.
Yes, thank you. Sorry for not answering that. That's exactly right. That we may typically at the end of the day, the lowest cost usually gets the work. In this case, I think it's in our best interest to always choose the experience first because of the benefits we'll get. So the value equation is much higher with this proposal. Thanks.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you very much. Councillor Hall already asked one of my questions. Has it gone out for RFP yet? Like, have we sent this out?
Thank you, Mayor. No, it has not.
Okay. Now, and help me just understand, in anything else, if you lower one by 20%, that would put other things up by as a ratio by an equal percentage. So but maybe I'm wrong. Can you explain that to me?
Thank you, Mayor. Essentially what we're doing is we're weighting the experience, past designs, past work on applications, higher for the particular supplier instead of cost.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bondi?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Maybe I'm just a little confused, but so we're going out for architectural services. When we passed the motion a couple of weeks ago, I thought it was undetermined as to what we were actually going to build, like up to a multi-use facility with either potentially 4,000 seats or 2,200, whatever, basically a double size. So, and that's all based on fundings and from private sector and senior levels of government, correct? So if we don't know what we're going to build, how can we do an architectural study that's going to cost us $1 million? And what I'm afraid of is I'm kind of anticipating your answer is going to be it's for the 4,000 seat multi-use facility. So if we have $1 million invested in architectural design, maybe some other costs associated, my concern is that once, you're in for a dime, you're in for a dollar kind of thing, right? So my question is, if we don't know what we're building, how do we hire an architectural firm to design something that we don't know what we're building?
Thank you, Mayor. So what council passed on May 27th was you gave us the framework to work in. So you told us that the municipality would put forward 18.5. More importantly for me on the design standpoint, you told me that you wanted a twin pad, you wanted an indoor multisport, and you wanted associated fields equal to 60 acres. So that's what we're designing to in that envelope. And that's the key. So if things change and we go from 4,000 to a 2,200, it's not going to change the overall design substantially at this phase one time period. The key here is that we're trying to do everything we can to put forward the correct application that gets us the maximum funds from the government. So whether it's a 4,000 or 2,200 is not going to make that much difference in the overall design.
Seems hard to believe that building something completely different from one another, is not going to be apples to pineapples. Like, you're saying like a twin pad arena, which we can all envision in our mind, is a 2,000 seat arena with a practice pad beside it. Easily, understood in our mind. A multi-use indoor soccer field, 60 acres, twin pad with a 4,000 seat. I would have to think that architectural design, if the funding doesn't come through, and I'm not real confident we're getting $50 million out of a government when we have 10 functioning arenas, frankly, but wouldn't, like you're saying, that design is still usable. It seems impossible.
So thank you, Mayor. So imagine it's the plan view, it's the top view, the overall land required for those. There is a difference, but it's not substantially that it's going to change.
The land
I believe
use.
the overall architecture portion of it.
The architecture is not significantly different between the two things that we're talking about.
So imagine the footprint of, and the top view of an arena, of a large arena. Now, what we're doing is we're adding a second level, adding additional seats, we're going up. So the actual plan, the plan view, the top view that you look down on is not going to change our land acquisition that much, except for parking it will.
Right, land acquisition, but this is a $1 million architectural study. This has got to be a little bit more complicated than. All I'm getting is, I'm afraid, and like I've said before, I'm afraid we're putting the cart before the horse without getting, like, what's our private sector commitment so far? 0, I would imagine. Well, frankly. And our federal and provincial grant that have been secured is 0. So, you know, I'm afraid we're moving too quickly on this, and we're going to end up with another Capitol Theater where, you know, this is probably 10 times the cost. And that's my concern, is that, you know, we start rolling the ball down the hill, it's going to be pretty hard to stop. But anyway, I'm going to lose this one, so it's okay. I'll be finished.
Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Just to clarify, this report is for architectural work on conceptual site plan, right? So this isn't a finalized, this is where the bathroom's going, you know, where the Zamboni's going to pull in and out, or any of those fine details. We're talking about a conceptual site design, correct?
Thank you, that is correct. Phase, and as we refer to as phase 1. Once this is complete, we get the feedback from the government. Phase 2 is a much more expensive option, much more detailed, and the cost will be much higher.
And
I
phase 2
anticipate the cost will be quite reasonable here with this proposal.
Yeah, so phase 2 is when you'd be talking about needing to know the finalized size to know more of the details, right? Okay. And is this type of change for a very specific RFP, knowing we may not have done this in the municipality recently, but is this a common practice in other agencies that do procurement or do RFPs or other government agencies?
Through your worship, Councillor McGregor, I wouldn't say it's common, but it certainly is a practice that is used under special circumstances like this one, where, you know, expertise on a project is critical.
Thank you.
Councillor Solomon.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to focus on the motion that we have before us, and that is the price score reduction. I've seen many times in the past where the highest or the lowest bidder does not get the work because the staff has concern about their ability to do the work. And I know that if this staff had a concern about the ability of the architectural firm to do the work because of their lack of experience, they'd come to us and tell us that. But but maybe I'm making the wrong assumption. We will have final approval. You'll come back to us and say, this is the group that we've chosen, what we recommended. And if you did, so that's correct. And they will come back and say, here's why we've chosen them. I would much prefer, and I've seen that many times, and in the past we used to ask questions of staff saying, well, what's your experience with these people? You know, how many bridges have they built? This kind of thing. So I'm satisfied that they'll come back to us and tell us which firm they recommend based on solid reasons. I would prefer to keep the price score where it is so people keep their pencil sharpened when they make their application. I trust our staff will choose the recommend the right group. We'll choose them. They'll recommend them. But if you tell them already that price isn't as important when they're doing their bidding, I would much prefer that they keep their eye on the ball on the 30% so that they've got their pencil sharpened when we get it. I don't think it's a question of you're waiting in your matrix. At the end of the day, you're going to tell us that you're satisfied or not satisfied. And even if they are the lowest bidder, if you're not happy with them, you're going to make the right recommendation, and we're going to trust your expertise. So I'm opposed to reducing it for that reason. I don't think that that's the answer to the problem. keep their eye on the price ball.
Mayor Canner,
Not
can I
bound
just,
in any way by, you're not bound in any way to accept the lowest.
Mr. Kelly?
so the way the process works is that we have it's like a two-envelope process. We'll have the conditions, the other 90% of the RFP will be past experience, show us your other work, et cetera. Convince us that you have the capabilities. We do a very honest evaluation of that, and we go through a matrix rating, and we say, okay, this is the score for them. So we haven't seen the price at all. Once it goes to price and they meet our requirements, the price then determines who gets the job. So we cannot go back and redo the evaluation previously. We have to now follow what we've done, and the price will determine who the eventual winner is.
With response to that, are you telling me that you do not have the flexibility to come back, through your worship, do not have the ability to come back and tell us that despite the fact that this is what the two envelopes show, that you don't recommend them? Because if you don't have that, I'm awful confused about what's gone on in the last 40 years.
So thank you, Mayor. To my knowledge is that only if they do not, that's why it's very important we set a budget beforehand. So if they do not meet the budget, I have a criteria to come back to you. But if I have deemed them in the first round, the first envelope, that they're adequate, the determining criteria is the price. And that's the only conditions, if my colleague would like to comment on it, that I could come back and say to you that we do not recommend them if they have not, in fact, hit our budget.
I don't think so. Your worship, don't we determine what the RFP, contents of the RFP are?
Thank you, Your Worship. We do have a standard approach to dealing with the RFPs, and as Mr. Kelly has tried to point out, typically the price represents approximately 30% of that, or 30%. So that's how we're driving it. We're trying to be respectful, that trying to have an open, transparent government. We're also being very clear with everyone that's bidding as to what the criteria and the evaluations are going to be based on. So our past practice has been that if we're going to actually have a bid, we determine up front how it's going to be run, and as Mr. Kelly's described, there'd have to be extraordinary circumstances to come back. What we're trying to recognize here is that with the application process, we believe that there's and again, this is the application process, it's not the full-blown who's going to build the complex, that we're trying to weight this in a direction that is going to maximize the municipality's ability to be successful with the bid. I think that's the direction Mr. Kelly was trying to move towards, but council's direction is what we need. I think Mr. Norton had another comment. John, were you?
So I'm not sure if I can shed any light on this, but I'll try. As I understand it, what we're saying here is our RFP bylaw, our bylaw currently requires 70% on what I would call qualitative type features, right? Like Mr. Kelly said, past experience and other features, other factors. And then 30% normally is attributed to price, and that's the lowest that staff can set it. Staff can set it higher when they do an RFP, but they can set it as low as 30%. What Mr. Kelly is seeking here is to lower that to 10% so that more weight can be given to the other factors, right? So obviously you score everyone out of in this case, if you lower it to 10%, you'd score everyone out of 90, and then you open that second envelope and you get the pricing and you score them on that last 10%. So the only difference is the weighting difference of the pricing compared to everything else. I think Mr. Mayor, Councillor Solomon is also correct that certainly after all of that process is over, if we have a bidder who is a problem for some reason, we still retain the option to reject that bidder if something becomes known to us that makes it, not a not recommended bidder, even though they won the process. We would come to council and have that discussion with you. We always retain that right. Council has the option to choose whoever they wish.
Okay, seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 10-8.
Item 17, community development.
Item 17A, Ontario Heritage Act, request for demolition listed at property 595 Wallace Street, Community of Wallaceburg.
Councillor C. McGregor.
Your Worship, I believe Mr. Jocks has a brief presentation after the motion is put on the floor.
Okay.
I had the other motion up in front of me, so I'd move that the property known as 595 Wallace Street, described as part lot 2, 3, and 4, Block A, Plan 112 in the community of Wallaceburg, be removed from the Chatham-Kent Municipal Heritage Register. Did you get that? Can you hear that?
Councillor Hall.
I'll second that motion.
Before I have the questions, I'll have a brief presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I did prepare a few remarks for this item as I was expecting deputations from the public and would like the opportunity to make comments to council regarding item 17A, the removal of 595 Wallace Street in the community of Wallaceburg from the Municipal Heritage Property Register. I would echo some of the comments made by the chair of the Municipal Heritage Committee, Chris Williams, earlier today. Without a doubt, the Steinhoff House in Wallaceburg is among the most significant heritage properties, if not one of the top 2 residential properties in the community of Wallaceburg, and it would meet the requirements of the Ontario Heritage Act for designation if council chose to entertain that motion. The property is currently not designated. From time to time in the past, councils considered this type of request for heritage properties, even though they're not designated. And these properties, as I mentioned, are located on the Municipal Heritage Property Register. The term that's often used is that these properties are listed. There's approximately 300 properties in Chatham-Kent, 40 of which are in the community of Wallaceburg, that are simply noted or recognized on a list that's compiled by administration and approved from council from time to time. There are no restrictions on alteration. The municipality doesn't regulate, the type of construction used, the color that you paint your front door, anything like that. The only regulation that applies to these structures for these properties is that a property owner submitted in writing to council their intention to demolish the building. And when that happens, the municipality is not obligated through the CBO to issue that demolition permit for 60 days. And in the meantime, and leading up to that, all the regular property standards, regulations in that bylaw apply as they would any other property. In the municipality of Chatham-Kent, there are approximately 90 properties that have a higher level of protection. These properties are designated. Many of these properties are publicly owned. They could be owned by a religious institution, or they're owned by a private property owner. These properties are protected legally by a bylaw registered on title and protections put in place through the Ontario Heritage Act. These properties are designated through a public notice procedure with appeal procedures, and alterations are regulated to some degree by the municipality. Ultimately, council's the final decision maker on these matters. Lastly, for designated properties, a higher standard exists in our property standards bylaw for maintenance. There are no designated properties in the community of Wallaceburg at this time. Speaking briefly to process, as I said, the Heritage Act sets out a 60-day window. That's not particularly a lot of days to move through an administrative process such as this. The demolition request came in via email on April 26. The Heritage Committee meets on a monthly basis. The item was considered at its next meeting on May 15th. Recognizing the significance of the property, the Heritage Committee moved to take time, visit the property, document it, prepare a designation report for the consideration of council. The committee adopted that report and made a subsequent motion at its meeting of June 19th, last Wednesday. The motion in its entirety is on this slide. And here we are 5 days later at council's final opportunity to consider the request. While I do support the opinion of the committee, I am coming to council with a recommendation to remove the property from the Heritage Register. You know, through the lens of community development as a whole, it should be recognized the position that this property has overall in the community and in its neighborhood. Over time, incremental losses of buildings in this area have really eroded the potential for revitalization of this historic neighborhood. At one time, and for over a century, the core of Wallaceburg on the north and south sides of the river was a center of industry and commerce. Almost a victim of its own success in the passage of time, Wallaceburg grew. At one time, at the center of town, since 1888 was the Center Bridge. That's now where the walking bridge stands. That was the only crossing of the Sydenham River that wasn't a ferry or a boat from 1888 until 1950. In 1950, the Lord Selkirk Bridge was constructed, which created the main thoroughfare between Chatham and Sarnia and diverted a great deal of traffic away from the Center Bridge through McNaughton Avenue and Dufferin Avenue. And these areas grew to become centers of commerce. Later, the Murray Street Bridge in 1974 was constructed to the east, again providing a different connection for travelers and people doing business in the region as well. This led to the Center Bridge becoming obsolete in 1983. It was fully decommissioned in 1984. It was reopened as the L.O. Stonehouse Walking Bridge, named after another Wallaceburg mayor, Llewellyn Stonehouse, who served from 1977 to 1981. Moving on from those historical comments, which sort of point to the fact that, you know, this area was no longer the center of commerce. It was no longer the thriving neighborhood as it once was. And then over the next several decades, you know, many buildings were lost, most, you know, due to fire, due to structural instability, ultimately demolition. But what exists today is an opportunity for redevelopment in the future. The recommendation in the report will serve to support any of those redevelopment opportunities. It will ensure that the development group who has acquired several properties in this area are able to move one step forward with their planning. It allows the municipality to focus any public support through grants or partnerships on future development and not what would be the costly rehabilitation of this property, which could be measured in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, as we could imagine from seeing some of the photographs provided by the property owner tonight. Chatham-Kent Council may be faced with these decisions in the future regarding other properties in other communities across Chatham-Kent. I would suggest that a Made in Chatham-Kent heritage preservation strategy would be beneficial to these processes. Simply that council could set a level for heritage preservation that aligns with CK Plan 2035 in the official plan. It would truly identify significant properties and give the community and council an opportunity to take action in advance, proactively, before these situations are faced in the future. And ultimately that would remove uncertainty when issues arise. This is likely something that I'll be recommending later this year. A quick aside, Bill 108 that the province of Ontario passed this year, More Houses, More Choices Act, it actually made several amendments to the Ontario Heritage Act that the planning group and the municipality will have to respond to anyway. I think that would be an appropriate time to maybe bring council something a little bit more baked for its consideration. It's certainly outside of the issue here today. Largely the strategy in prior years was that designations and designating properties was owner driven. Previous councils were on record requiring owner consent. That generally led to only certain properties being considered and not necessarily the most significant, and sometimes properties that might not have otherwise been considered. Second to last point, designation wouldn't require the owner to maintain or restore the property. It is, you know, a legal document registered on title of the property. repairing a foundation, rebuilding a kitchen, replacing windows, those acts cost the same, whether or not the property is designated or not. The fact is, an old building is an old building, and they're generally more expensive to maintain, regardless of status. And lastly, I wouldn't be doing my job as a resource to the Heritage Committee if I did not take the opportunity to note that heritage buildings are important. They provide a link to our past through a tangible physical place that we can go and see and learn about our history and where our community has come from. They are and can be very valuable assets in the present day. We have examples of those buildings all across Chatham-Kent that people celebrate on a daily basis. They're very successful. And these buildings will continue to inspire us into the future. And it'd be my pleasure to talk about heritage to council anytime it asks me to. So with all of that being considered, as well as the information in the report and the prior speakers, it is recommended that the property known as 595 Wallace Street, described as part of lots 2, 3, and 4 in Block A, Plan 112 in the community of Wallaceburg, be removed from the Chatham-Kent Municipal Heritage Register. Thank you.
Councillor Pincinel.
Thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate your passion, Ryan. I get the whole historical value of this house, but this building, by the pictures that the owner has presented, is derelict. It's in bad shape. And we can't save all these old houses, you know, as much as they do have that historic value. This one's beyond repair, and unfortunately, its best before date is done and it needs to go.
Councillor C. McGregor.
Thank you, and through the mayor. Councillor Pincinel said a couple of things that I would have liked to have said. And, growing up in the town of Wallaceburg, I've had a lot of years where, when I was younger, that it was a very beautiful and gorgeous house. Unfortunately, throughout the years, it has been let go. And I think when it gets to the point that it's much more costly to try to renovate than it would be to try to build, when it gets to this state, like, it's a real shame what's happened. It's become home to vagrants until the new owners went in and boarded up. Numerous calls have been made to police and fire down to the building over the last little bit, again, prior to the new owner that has just taken over with the past owner. So, it is a real shame. I'm sure in its day it was just fantastic and beautiful inside. But, it's somehow we almost need to be able to get to those homes before they're ever left to become such a downfall in the community. And I know if it's left on the registry and the demolish is denied, it's just going to sit there again, and it's not going to be restored. It's going to just continue to be an eyesore and a place for derelicts and possible drug users and vagrants to frequent and again continue to cause issues and problems within the community.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I appreciate the report, Ryan, and the presentation. I also appreciate the deputation tonight from Ms. Berggraf on behalf of the investors and the new owners of the property. I think the photos that you shown really showed all of council what the property has turned into, and it's very unfortunate, but it's definitely a reality. I also appreciate the presentation and comments from Chris from the Heritage Committee tonight. I agree, it's absolutely essential for us to preserve and not lose sight of our history. This is definitely a significant part of the history of Wallaceburg. And just to let council know as well, and let the community know, I spoke with one of the other investors, one of the owners today, and they're very open, and I'm very encouraged to hear that they're willing to, if we move forward with this demolition tonight, they're willing to try to preserve some pieces of the property and when they go in there, whether it's working with anyone interested in keeping some of those artifacts or something that might be able to be deemed to be preserved. So I thought that's a very encouraging thing. I didn't touch base with the museum today, but there could be an opportunity there to have some type of a display at the museum. I'd have to talk to them, but I know Brian told me that you'd be willing to help facilitate some of those conversations with moving forward. So that's encouraging as well. Joe, I think, yeah, it's absolutely the right way forward. It's encouraging to see some local investors that are looking at redeveloping this part of town. And it's has so much potential, and it's an absolute beautiful part of our community, and I'm looking forward to seeing what their vision is. So, thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 14-4.
Item 17B, JM Controls and Electric Limited, offer to purchase.
Councillor Solomon. Oh, yes. We need to change the motion up there.
That isn't the right motion.
We're just testing you to see.
I thought it was a trick. Well, I'd move it isn't up there, but I'd move the recommendation to accept the offer to purchase.
Councillor Kirkwood-White,
I'll second the motion.
any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
She just got to make the change
Okay.
first. Yes.
Okay, see no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 18-0.
Item 18, Chief Administrative Office.
Item 18A, Community Partnership Fund, 2019 recommendations.
Councillor Sakachi.
I'd like to move the recommendations with an addition. I'd like to add the addition of recommendation number 5, that the 5 remaining eligible applications that were submitted but not recommended in this report be funded in the amount of $24,800 as per the chart below by the Partnership Reserve. Do you want me to read them off through you, Your Worship?
Yes, please.
So East Side Pride, the event is a street party. Total event cost of $9,600. The grant portion of $4,800. Firefest, the event is Firefest. They were eligible as well. A total event cost of $30,000. Applicable grant for $5,000. The Blenheim Classic Auto Show, and obviously that's the auto show in Blenheim. Eligible, the total event cost was $16,000. A grant for $5,000. I'd like to also add the Chatham-Kent and Lambton Children's Water Festival, eligible, and the total event cost of $10,000, the grant being $5,000, and as well as a Tilbury Action Team, a series of events, and eligible, total cost of $10,000, the grant of $5,000. And just during the budget process, I know we had a lot of conversation, which seemed like hours and hours, and I guess I just didn't really realize that there was going to be the potential to have a reserve for this money, which, I mean, it's great that there is. So I just think that because these events were eligible, I think that it's best utilized to fund these events.
Councillor Oche. Sorry?
I'll second that.
Questions? Councillor Pinsino.
Thank you, Your Worship. First of all, I want that separated from the original motions, or have 5 separated out from 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then I guess my question would be, we have a policy and a procedure set up again, and we've talked about this all night, and now we're going beyond our procedure, and we're going to add more in. Now, whether we get the money there or not, there's a reason these ones weren't accepted, and I guess through you to Amy, this is going against everything that we've set up, is it not? Our policies and procedures?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Pinsino. The applications that Councillor Sakachi has outlined to you are all eligible. The reason they were not recommended for the simple fact we ran out of funding.
Okay, so they rated lower down on your list then, right? But you followed everything the way we set it up for you to do your job.
Correct. We followed the procedure. The review committee reviewed the applications, scored them based on the evaluation criteria, and these are the ones that scored the least number of points.
Okay, that's my point. Okay, so I would like 5 separated out of the rest, please.
Councilor McGrail?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So as I was reviewing the different organizations that got the grant money, I came across the Chatham-Kent Health Alliance, and they, it seems to me, and you please correct me, is that they're getting 2 grants for the same event. I don't understand this.
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Councillor McGrail. They are receiving a grant of $5,000 to the event called Festival of Holidays. And then under the community partnership program project portion, they would be receiving funds for the display portion. This is not something that is not uncommon. In several prior years, groups have received funding under both the event portion of CPF as well as the project portion.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you very much. Councillor McGrail started down the road, but I'd like to continue along that road. Have we ever funded a hospital or a hospital foundation initiative in the past?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you to Councillor Thompson. Yes, we have funded this type of foundation before, specifically the Chatham-Kent Health Alliance through physician recruitment. That was through core grants. It wasn't the foundation, but was the hospital.
So let me rephrase. Have we ever funded a hospital initiative or a foundation initiative through the Community Partnership Fund?
Councillor, to the best of my knowledge, at this time, I do not recall anything, but I would be able to go back through my reports and...
Okay. What is the Festival of Holidays?
The Festival of Holidays, based on some initial information I received from that committee, would be a month long starting in December, where they would have light displays working with community groups as well as for-profit who would sponsor light displays, and it would provide musical events for citizens across Chatham-Kent, free events. Okay, so I mean, I look at the list here, and the Kiwanis Club of Ridgetown and the Kinsman Club of Chatham are on here, and a lot of others. Do we have any rules, or have we had any, even maybe not rules, but guidelines in the past where we would or wouldn't fund a fundraising organization like the foundation? So you're asking, just for clarification, have we ever provided community partnership funding to groups that do fundraising?
That strictly do fundraising.
Again, I'd have to go through all of my reports. However, many recipients have a large component of the work they do provide fundraising for community groups.
In your best estimation, what is the Community Partnership Fund for?
Councillor, if it's an event, the primary goal was to provide seed funding to that committee or group of citizens in order to allow it to grow to the point that they could go to for-profit for sponsorships for it to continue on. It was never supposed to be funding for sustainability. The goal for community projects was strictly to provide some assistance in funding whether it's small-scale or large-scale projects. In the past, we have funded things as small as accessibility ramps, which to me is not a small project, but to as large as quite a few of the splash pads in our community.
Sounds good. I think everybody can kind of sense where I'm going with this. For me, philosophically, the Community Partnership Fund is for small organizations that have a limited ability to fundraise for themselves. When I look at this list, I see a lot of things on here that go, no-go, depending upon really if we step up to the plate. When I look at Firefest, it might go. When I look at things like the Kinsman Club, the pumpkin events, that won't go in Wallaceburg unless we step up. And then I look here at the Chatham-Kent Health Alliance Foundation, which respectfully, they do a lot of great work in the community, absolutely. But they're also a very, very big organization with very, very deep pockets. Not as deep as we'd all like in the healthcare industry, clearly. And I'm going to make a motion that we remove the Chatham-Kent Health Alliance Foundation, both streams of funding for 2019.
We have a seconder for that? Councillor Finn?
Beyond that, I have no further questions. I don't think it's, I think it's a very worthy, potentially worthy, but I don't think that's the best use of the municipality's money to fund something that not only is outside of our jurisdiction. Truth be told, this is a provincial issue. And I look at where that money could be better spent for small community groups in any one of our communities. Absolutely. Not just mine, but any of them. And I think that 15 grand would be better spent elsewhere. Thank you.
Any other questions relating to the motion that Councillor Thompson has brought up to eliminate? So Councillor Sakachi, I saw your hand earlier.
Not directed towards
Okay.
that.
So you put a hand just for that particular thing. So Councillor Foss, followed by Councillor Harrigan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I had my hand up before that motion as well, so I don't want to lose my spot in the queue there as well. First of all, we have a criteria for the community partnership funding. What we're doing tonight by that motion and by Councillor Sakachi's motion is we're changing that whole criteria. So if that's the case, we might just well start right back from square one, dissolve the committee, go back to the way it was, because we're just going backwards here. These people had got together, had looked at the applications, they knew how much money we had, they made the best decision that they made, and now we're going to revamp that. That's not the purpose of this process, so I'm definitely against that motion as well as Councillor Sakachi's motion.
Councillor Harrigan?
Thank you. I also cannot support the motion that Councillor Thompson has just put on the table, and I'm going to read just a couple of lines of a letter that was sent to Council earlier today by a member of the committee who participated in the evaluation process and shortlisted some of these recommendations. She says, "Please know that every citizen on the committee took that responsibility seriously. Whether they work for the municipality or another entity, we came together with a common goal. It was a respectful process with opportunity to ask questions to better understand the rating system. The conversation and rationale and considerate, solid decisions were made by all." So I just wanted to put that out there because I think it is important that we respect the process and the recommendations made by this committee that now is infused with citizen members. When it comes to Councillor Sakachi's motion, I think that's another conversation around should we as councillor had been more proactive in being more transparent about what we were going to spend some of that reserve money on and putting more money into the community fund before the committee was able to meet. But in terms of what's on the table now, I think we should follow the recommendations of the committee. And then the question I would have for item number 5 is, would the committee or did the committee have that sentiment of it's too bad we didn't have more money to give to these other projects?
Any other questions relating to that motion? I just want to add to that as well is that I've had the privilege of talking to the organizers from the CKHA and have an idea of what they're doing, and certainly regardless of the size of the organization, they're stepping up and going to create a pretty fabulous event in Chatham-Kent. And it's going to cost a lot more than the $10,000 or $15,000. They're going to bring a lot of resources to it and add a wonderful thing for the month of December across Chatham-Kent. So hearing what that was, when after coming out of the meeting what they're planning to do, I was really excited. It's a free event, nothing to do with fundraising for the CKHA. It's to bring it into the community. So when I look at that, and as well, the committee itself has looked at this, and they have seen a lot more detail of what this project's about, and they've said, yes, this is something we should be doing as a community to promote. So I'm certainly going to support keeping the CKHA projects within the funding. So, Seeing no other questions, we'll put this to vote. Amendment, that the Chatham-Kent Health Alliance be removed from both streams of funding.
All votes are in, motion fails 2 to 15.
Okay, so we'll move back into the regular to talk about the items, the original motion. I've got a lot of speakers here, starting with Councillor Oche, followed by Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Your Worship. And Amy, this is, I guess, not really to you because I'm wondering why we piled in that much more money if we weren't going to use it. And I'm not sure whose motion that was. Originally, was that yours, Your Worship, to put that money into the extra money into the funds?
Maybe I can clarify that. Certainly, when we put the extra money in there, it was to deal with just this. Now, unfortunately, we haven't had a chance to say exactly how this is going to be used, but the concept was if we wanted to put more money towards the events. And what cut it off was the original budget from the prior year, that when Amy reviewed the things, she didn't pull any more money into the events portion from the 370,000 or so there that we put into the budget. So we're looking at the 24,000 to pull that to events that the committee qualifies and says, yes, these are events that we want to see happen in the community, but they had to rank them. And with the amount of funding, that's what happened. I fully see this is a transitionary year. I fully see next year that we'll have a recommendation going in advance of this to say, you know what, this is how much we're going to do towards events, this is how much we do this, and we're going to have a portion of the other money there. So that's the purpose of the motion of the 24,000. That's what when we put this forward, that's what I was envisioning it to do to support events across Chatham-Kent.
So through to you, Your Worship. So next year it might be 85,000 or 100,000 in this particular.
Yeah, I fully see that Amy and her group will put together a complete recommendation going into next year, so we'll know exactly how that money is going to be used and allocated, and then we'll be ranking the projects accordingly. But to say 5 projects don't qualify and we'll put all this money in reserves when there's some great projects going to happen in the community, that was not what was meant to, at least in my mind, wasn't meant to be when we set the fund up.
Right, so I'd like to apologize to Amy because it was council that dropped the ball on here. If we had that money to put towards that, I apologize because you're the one that's getting questioned about this, and it was actually us that put the money in there and didn't do anything with it. So thank you for what you've done.
Councillor Foss, followed by Councillor Harrigan.
I'll just reiterate, I guess, what I said before. The process is in place. The dollar amounts were established through the budget process. And I think by adding those dollars, we're just changing the process, and I don't believe that we should be doing that.
Councillor Harrigan, followed by Councillor Kirkwood-White.
So just really quickly, I'll be supporting all of these agenda recommendations, including number 5, because as I had said earlier, I truly believe this is a case simply as of the committee saying we don't have enough funds to continue saying yes. They've met those requirements and their eligibility, and I know that just based on seeing some of the grants that are on that list or projects that are on that list, some of them it might have been their first time actually applying for these community partnership grants, so I could see where they would have ranked a bit lower just from inexperience. But it's great that we have these organizations coming out and starting to apply for these grants to improve the services that they're offering. So I'll be supporting all of the recommendations, but I do want to say that we've seen a bit of a pattern happen with the 400K Community Partnership Fund, and it's exposing an issue that I think we're going to have to deal with as a council sooner rather than later, be it through staff support or our conversations, is that the longer we go just having this bucket of money in a general community reserve, the more it becomes the like fun spending money that my family keeps in a jar, and suddenly it disappears and we're only a third of the way through the year and we say, oh, where'd that go? So I think it's really important that we find time to put on the agenda what it is that we're going to do with that money, what things were considered, what that process was like, so that we're not just reactively distributing dollars when there are issues that come up in the community. So that's just a comment, but I'll be supporting this.
Councillor Kirkwood-White, followed by Councillor C. McGregor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I already know the answer to this question, but I wanted Amy to say it out loud. Can you comment on the fact that for years you did not have citizens on the committee and how you feel about that now?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Kirkwood-White. I've thoroughly enjoyed all my years as being administrative support to the Community Partnership Fund when it was just administrative staff, and even more so now that I have the citizens. As Councillor Harrigan had said, they all came in with an extreme level of dedication, very thought-provoking questions, had a thorough understanding of the process and the evaluation criteria, and I couldn't have been more pleased with how the meetings went, and I'm really hoping that Council will allow me to continue having citizens on the review committee.
Councillor C. McGregor.
Thank you. It's just I just want to ask what one of these festivals are, if you can tell me. If not, you can get back to me. Crowfest 2019. I've been asked, what is this? And I can't tell anybody. I've guessed a couple times, but I have no idea.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor McGregor. I'll try my best based on the application information and the one brief meeting I had with them. Crowfest is going to be a series of events in the fall where it will have a family component as well as a later evening component where there'll be a concert as well as more of kind of almost a Halloween party for everyone in the downtown core of Chatham. I believe that they're still looking at all the particulars regarding that. And once I know more information, I'll be able to share that with council.
Thank you. That's not exactly what I imagined, but thank you very much.
Councillor Latimer.
I just want to chime in here. Amy, did you not change some of the parameters with regard to this fund to enable more participation by different organizations in the community? Did you? Did it get kind of tweaked? I don't know.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Latimer. To make sure I understand your question, we have evaluation criteria that groups are evaluated on. With regards to the grant guidelines, no, we didn't do any change. That's still the same groups that were considered eligible. We have not made any changes to that.
But, okay, so it didn't change, so you would enable a greater participation. By example, has the Chatham-Kent Health Association or Foundation applied before, ever?
Not to my knowledge for the years that I've been the grant administrator. I don't believe they have.
And that's not because they couldn't, it's just that they didn't.
Correct. Just for clarification for those in council chambers as well as those listening at home, the Community Partnership Fund was established in 2000. And what's really unique about it is anyone can apply. Most grants you have to be a registered not-for-profit or have a charitable number. With the Community Partnership Fund that council set up, you do not need that to be considered. You could just be a group of citizens or a little committee that comes together to put on a Canada Day event, or even as something as small as having a monthly community cleanup program.
Thank you for clarifying that. I will be in support of this recommendation, but I also want to say I am very pleased to read Kelly's letter today to all of us, and I think it's a great idea and a great thing that we have 8 dedicated citizens working with seasoned staff. And I know that it's been bumpy this year with regard to the Community Partnership Fund. I think timelines were an issue just because the new council and you wanted to get out and meet people in the community. And that was all done in an effort to improve transparency. And I must admit, after this past week and all the bumps, I'm thinking, oh man, in our effort to improve transparency, it kind of looked like we bungled it. But I think the spirit of this is to say, okay, we may have messed up with regard to getting this off the ground, and there were some promises made and assumptions, and I think the spirit of what this partnership fund is meant to do in the community is reflected in the recommendation tonight. So I will be supporting this, and I'm hoping that next year, because we won't have any timeline issues, and we will be affording a paper option versus, well, maybe. I think that was on the plate. I think we still hear some community groups, especially those who are not organized, that maybe those 2 or 3 people of a neighborhood who want to get together and hold an event for the neighborhood that may not have access to the online version. We should have a paper version. But I think kind of those things might sauce out and be a little less effortless. And what do you think?
No, I would definitely thank you for your feedback and those of the community groups with regards to the process. Also wanted to give council a bit of an update. We are looking at always improving it each year with regards to events, looking at improving that process based on the information that council had provided in the previous meeting that I was in front of you. And that for events, speeding up the process, having the application open up in September where the recommendations come before council in December.
Great.
So that groups don't have that anxiety of knowing whether they're recommended or not. They just have to wait for March for when council approves the budget.
Perfect. Thanks. Good job, Amy. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put, Councillor Scotchy.
I just want to make a couple clarifications. So there was some conversation in regards to, I heard the specific line, undermining a selection committee and not adhering to policy and procedure, and the money not being there from different comments. And I want to be very, very adamant in saying the fact that I'm very thankful for the committee and what they did. I'm thankful for the hard work that you put in. And I do have a question actually to Mr. Worship here in regards to when you set up this fund, you did not, if we would have had more time, you wouldn't have expected us to have the reserve. Is that correct, sir?
Sorry, can you?
So you didn't, when we set this fund up, we weren't anticipating for us to have excessive money at the end, because people are saying that there's no money there. There's money there. It's just they can't basically use the money because we haven't approved that to be released.
Yes, because had we not approved the 370, exactly what the committee did would have been exactly what they should have done. Ranked it and said, okay, well, we only have so much funds. But the committee didn't factor in that we have this $387,000 that was approved to help those. So the items that you put in your motion, if they had another $24,000 sitting there, they would have approved them. So we're not approving projects that the committee didn't say were good. It's just the ranking. Because there's a number of projects the committee said no to, and we're not bringing any of those tonight to fund. So we're honoring what the committee did, but we're taking a portion of that reserve. And certainly of the 387, I'm not proposing to just go spend it. I want, we want to keep it, and who knows, 2 years from now, if there's a reserve and some really great project comes up in the community, we can fund it through that source.
Perfect. I just wanted clarification that there is money to access there. It's just that because of how the process went, we kind of handcuffed the committee in regards to how to spend the money and the amount of time they had to go through the process. So thank you for your speedy hard work, and I really hope this is supported because these are eligible projects and there is money there to be utilized.
Councillor Finn?
Through you, your mayor. Just a couple questions. How much is left in the reserve? And how many groups were denied?
Through your worship to Councillor Finn, if I could ask council to refer to the Appendix C of the report, you'll see that during the budget process, $387,000 was set aside for the partnership reserve. I've come before council with a report asking for funding for the Chatham Concert Band in the amount of $16,970 and Wallaceburg Concert Band in the amount of $18,666. That was passed, as well as within the body of this report, asking for additional funds of the $30,049, within a remaining balance in the reserve of $321,315. Sorry, Councillor, to your second question, you asked how many were considered ineligible. Under community projects, there were 4. Under events, 7.
Councillor McGrail?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Can you explain to us what is the additional funds for and what was involved in that? For the $30,049, please.
Through your worship to Councillor McGrail, if I could ask you to refer to the recommendations in this report. On the first page, under community events with the scoring, the application that scored the highest received 26 points. It ranked down and funding ended with one event at a score of 19. The review committee had now recommended that instead of just funding all of the applications that score between 26 and 20 points and leaving the one that was 19, that's why they've now asked for the additional 30,000 and changed in order to fund all events that score between 26 points all the way through to 19. What might be easier if the council was to refer to an email I sent to them, I believe, on Thursday that showed the ranking.
Okay, seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote. We're going to be voting on 1 through 4 and then voting on 5 separately. So we'll put it to vote.
Councillor Solomon? So this is based on recommendations 1 through 4. Motion approved, 7-1. Sorry, 17-1. Thank you.
Okay, now we'll vote on number 5.
All votes are in. Motion passes 13-5.
Item 18B, motion by Councillor Hall regarding Canada Day funding.
Councillor Hall?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Yes, since I brought my notice of motion a couple of weeks ago, unfortunately, the Canada Day event in Wallaceburg has been canceled for this year. The whole intention, I guess, of bringing this forward was to try to empower the organizers to keep the event going and give it a boost, just like we do with all these grants that we give out. Unfortunately, I think there was some negativity around town that didn't help with the situation. So unfortunately, came to the decision to cancel the event this year. Hopefully, we can regroup in Wallaceburg, and so people can, if they want to see this event happen again in the future, we can get a group together and make it happen for for 2020 and for years to come. So that being said, I'm going to pull my motion from the agenda tonight.
Okay, item 19, closed session reports.
Thank you, and through the mayor, I would move that the closed session report for Monday, June 24th be approved. Council was directed administration on proposed disposition of land by the municipality with regard to new school of the Catholic District School Board, Section 2392C, Municipal Act 2001. Proposed acquisition of land by the municipality with regard to multi-use recreation facility property, Section 2392C of the Municipal Act. The following item was removed from the agenda. Advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for the purpose with regard to Erie Shore Drive, Section 2392F of the Municipal Act.
Could you repeat that?
Item 20, approval of communication item. Yes, seconded by Councillor B. McGregor. Any questions? All in favor?
I want to vote in favor because I'm so impressed the way Carmen had to. She's such a trooper to have to do that long motion with the voice.
Councillor Solomon is seconding that one. Okay, all in favor? Oh, we got to vote, sorry, we have to vote electronically on this one.
Really?
Yeah. Meredith, is it on? Okay, you can do a show of hands.
Favor, opposed, carried. Item 20, going to get a motion for approval on the information package. Councillor Oche.
I'll put through the, forward the motion.
Councillor Bondi. Any items to pull out? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed, carried. Non-agenda business. I guess I'll start, because I know that each and every one of us, there's going to be 18 hands up, including mine, talking about what our last weekend went through. What an amazing weekend in Chatham-Kent. The tractor pull, threshing festival, retro fest, RM 40th, car show in Erio, whole bunch of other events. The community came together in a big way. That tens of thousands of people came out to those events, and we stepped it up to a whole new level here in Chatham-Kent. The special thanks goes out to Rob Myers, his vision to 40 years ago to start this company and where it's moved to today, looking at the world-class event that was put on. I was out there and looking around at any country in the world, any city in the world would have been proud to have that event. We had it here right in Chatham-Kent. Thousands of people from outside the community came here and just loved it. I've heard so many great things, I mean, about the event. Even when you go to social media, you see virtually everything super positive about it. There was an amazing buzz. So I just wanted to thank, on behalf of council, Rob Myers and the whole organizing crew that went along. There was hundreds of volunteers, etc. I wanted to thank them all for making Chatham-Kent such an amazing place to live. And it would, yes. We will be talking about this event for years to come, and I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Shropshire just to make an additional comment on that.
Thank you, Worship. Just I wanted to shout out to the staff team with municipality who was supporting Rob and his team. We had hundreds of volunteers who were out. We had people doing extra time. The community looked great. And from our emergency service providers to our public works people to our rec people to those who are managing our cultural events, I think everybody stepped up to provide support and was really super proud of the team, and I just want to thank them formally for their efforts.
Councillor Pinsino.
Thank you, Worship. First of all, I'd like to thank you for making the trip out to Thamesville Saturday morning, help me judge the baby contest. That was a good thing. I'd like to congratulate all the Threshing Festival Committee. They're so dedicated and they did a great job. They made the event very successful, and it was. The Retrofest didn't hurt the crowds either night. It was down a little bit in the during the day at the Midway, but other than that, it was great. I'd like to thank all the other volunteers, because there's a lot of people behind the scenes that, you know, it takes a lot of people to make something like this happen. I'd like to personally thank Rob Myers. He made contributions towards our Threshing Festival as well. Rob wanted every community to prosper. He was having his big event, but he, you know, that's the type of guy he is. I didn't support the money going to RM when it was here 3 or 4 weeks ago, and you know, I regret that. Seeing what this man has done in this community. Not very often, I'm very methodical on my voting, and that one I think I missed the mark. Rob Myers is a class act, as the mayor said, and he's a great ambassador for this community, and you know, kudos to him. He had a very successful event. I come down Saturday, and that's a car show like I've never seen, when you're from one end of town to the other, and no, it was just a class act all the way around, and you know, kudos to Rob.
Councillor McGrail, followed by Councillor Kirkwood-White.
Thank you. I just want to give a little overview of the Pancor tractor pull. Wow, what a great time. The Dover Kingsmen did a great job, and the girls from Pretty in Pink behind the bar handled all the requests seamlessly. Attendance, I hear, was over 3,000 people, so people came out strong, and it was a very good showing.
Councillor Kirkwood-White.
Thank you, Your Worship. Before I left the house this morning, my husband said to me, if you get a chance to say something under non-agenda business, make sure you say congratulations and thanks to those who were responsible for cleaning up in Tecumseh Park and around the Granite Club. My husband happens to be the resident volunteer custodian at the Granite Club, and he said he picked up 1 pop can and 3 Kleenexes. And that was it.
Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Worship. Mine's a little off the record, but with this weekend in Ridgetown, Friday night, we're having our parade and fireworks to follow. They're having a street sale uptown on Saturday. Everybody's welcome out. Thank you.
Councillor Oche.
Mine's nothing to do with next weekend or this past weekend. It's actually not till November, but I've been putting together Let's Light Up Memorial Park in Tilbury. Applied for a grant, not through this one, so no one thinks that I got any money. But we got $10,000 to put hydro into the Memorial Park, and the Tilbury Lions just signed on. Tilbury Lions, and they're going to give us another $10,000 to put in into the park. So we'll have. It's now called the Tilbury Lions Christmas Light Festival. So hopefully everybody can get out. We're going to have quite a bit of hydro put in there, so we'll have more than 2 strands of light, like we would have had if we wouldn't have got any of this. But so it's going to happen November 28th, I believe, is our parade. And after the parade, it's coming back to the park so we can light it up, and then it'll go into the new year. But I'd just like to congratulate the Tilbury Lions for jumping on board with us and making a huge difference for our festival in Tilbury. Thank you.
Councillor Solomon.
Another very important event was held last September in Chatham-Kent in Pancor, which was the International Plowing Match. Several months ago, I requested and was told that we would receive a full detailed financial report in June. June has come, and June is about to go, and there'll be no more council meetings in June. So I saw this past week that the International Plowing Match Committee has now awarded very generous gifts to several deserving groups in the community. So I take it they're now ready to complete their audit and their detailed financial report. So I'd like to know, when are we going to get it? It's not June well, I guess it's still June, but we're not going to have any more council meetings in June.
Your Worship, in June the 4th or 5th, I had a conversation with Kathy Lasby, who is the Executive Director of the OPA. Some of you may have seen that shiny document that came out that's the OPA's sort of provincial annual report, but it isn't what reflects the finances for the Chatham-Kent plowing match. She indicated to me through email that the group responsible for that is the local committee, and that they were finishing off their report, and her last words to me was that she thought that they had not yet finalized the audit of their finances, although she didn't give a date on when that might be. So I'm not sure whether Mayor Caniff may know more about that as one of the co-chairs of the timing of that.
Yes, I'd like to clarify that certainly the local committee that we incorporated and we ran the event, but OPA was the umbrella over it. So our financials that we have are half the event. So we may have 60% of the gate receipts and 40% of the sponsorships and this. So we could give you a complete set of our financials, but they're meaningless. They consolidate up with the OPA. The OPA in their annual report, that's when we put it together, because we take our finances, we put it with theirs, add it together and divide by 2. So that's the issue, is that we could give you ours. So that's why we go to the OPA and say, the annual report, what they put out, they don't share, other than through the annual report, that's how they share that piece, and they consolidate the event to say overall. For instance, they go out and they'll get a provincial sponsorship from Hydro One. That goes on their books, not ours. And if they go out and get a particular sponsorship, or they sell tickets, they do whatever, it's on their statement, not ours. So the issue is, we could issue our statement, but it's not going to be meaningful in any way, shape, or form. So that's why we look to the annual report, which is not all that detailed. It does show the high-level profit loss, and it shows that the total event made $250,000, of which we share in half of it. 125,000 goes to them. And it shows the high-level detail of sponsorships and various things. So we cannot present to you a consolidated statement from the local committee. It has to come from the OPA. So that's why the annual report is there, and OPA will have to answer any questions specifically to the consolidated statement, because they're the ones that manage all that.
Okay, that's not what I asked for in several months ago, and that's not what council heard that we were going to get. So I want to see, and the public wants to see, because I'm only a spokesman for the public, wants to see the detailed report. And even if it's only ours, they want to see receipts and disbursements and know what came in, what went out. I'm sure it's a good news story. I just am perplexed at why we don't get it. That's all. So, yeah, I mean, if you say it's meaningless, maybe we can be the judge of that after we see it, but the annual report isn't going to have any line items that tell us what came in and what went out.
Yes, the annual report has a whole appendix that shows all the total revenues for the event and all the expenses, and details it out.
It does?
On a consolidated basis, yes.
Okay, so what's wrong with us also seeing ours in advance?
Well, we put it out, but then you're going to look and say, well, the sponsorships is only this. Well, we're only picking up what was a check written to the local, not the OPA. So you'll look at it, and we won't be able to answer any questions related to the overall big picture of it, because it adds the two together.
Well,
it's like
that's fine, but I still think that's what we deserve to see. And I think that's what I thought.
Well, we can certainly put that out there, but to answer questions in the bigger picture, we know that the overall event raised $250,000, and you'll see that from ours, the local committee brought in virtually all of that on the statement. But again, that's meaningless, because wherever the checks are written, there's allocations going back and forth between, et cetera. So it'll beg more questions, and the answers are driven by the consolidated.
Well,
we certainly put it out.
Well, can we get it in July?
Yes, as far as I know, it should be available now, because that was used for the consolidation within the OPA. Yeah. So,
and it may well be after that we have to wait before we ask any questions. Maybe there'll be no questions. I'm hoping there'll be no questions when we get the OPA one, or IPM one, whatever it's called this week, the Ontario Plowing Association full report. But
well, because we've got the annual report, we have that scanned. I know we put it. We can send that out, and so you can see the overall consolidated version. We can send it out to council tomorrow.
And shortly after, we can get the local one too.
We can find that. We'll dig that up and send that out as well. The local.
Good, thank you.
But again, it takes the local, and you have to add the OPA piece to get to the consolidated.
Yep, thank you.
All right. Any other? Councilor Latimer.
3 thank yous. 1 to the Classic Car Cruise organizers. I had 6 out-of-town house guests over the weekend, and they couldn't get over the enthusiasm, and also to the people of Chatham-Kent along that alternate Classic Car Cruise. They gussied up their properties. They were out there with their lawn chairs, their families, and their friends. And I had the comment from my out-of-town guests, what a way to bring together the rural-urban people of this municipality. I really would like the Classic Car Cruise organizers to think about using those alternate routes again, because I think it it offered an opportunity for those people who wouldn't ordinarily be part of that celebration to be very much a part of it. And also to the Erio Car Club, who I found, and again, I was unable to attend that celebration due to a family death, but my house guests did attend, and they found that the celebration from the Retrofest flowed effortlessly into Erio and their car club setup, and I wanted to make sure that they knew they did a bang-up job, and again, to the municipal staff who helped them. I didn't hear a whole lot of negative feedback out of this weekend down there, so only good from my house guests. So, and the last comment was from one house guest, I think we ought to consider moving down here to Chatham-Kent. I thought that was great. So hats off.
Councillor Scotchy?
Really quick, shortest one yet. Just want to remind everybody, it's back this weekend, the Festival of Nations, so hopefully everybody continues this streak of great activities in Chatham-Kent and attends these events well.
Yes, just want to add to it, as many of us remember what it was a long time ago, 15 years ago, it's going to be taking a lot of what happened there, adding some new things, and one of the highlights is there will be a Loverboy, the band, will be coming down doing a free concert at Tecumseh Park on Sunday night, so it should be a pretty crazy one down there. So enjoy, everybody. Item 22, reading of the bylaw. First and second reading. Councillor B. McGregor, seconded by Councillor Pensino. Any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Third and final reading. Councillor Oche, seconded by Councillor Finn. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Resolution, council in closed session and adjournment.
Thank you. I'm going to try. I move that Chatham-Kent Council adjourn to its next meeting to be held on Monday, July 15th, 2019, and that Chatham-Kent Council authorize itself to meet in closed session on that day to discuss any matters permitted by the Municipal Act.
Can I get a motion to adjourn? Seconded by Councillor B. McGregor. All in favor? Opposed? It's a wrap.